Hi there, and welcome to this video in my spicy question series of videos where I look at some of the trickier questions that have come up in GCSE Maths over the last few years. You might be thinking, looking at this first screen, well, this question can't possibly be that hard because it's question 6 from the higher paper, so it's quite early on in the higher tier paper, and it's one of the last questions in a foundation tier paper. You'll see why. I mean, you can have a look at the question, but I'll show you it a bit larger on the next slide. I found it really awkward. In my first year of teaching, this was the first exam paper that came out, and I remember the papers came down, I had to go to the questions, and I got to this question and thought, I am not a very good mathematician. I really struggled to do it, and I sort of gave up and moved on. It's one of those ones that once you see what you do, it's much easier. It sounds like quite an obvious statement, but I'm going to talk through the strategies that I used to help me find out what I needed to do. Here's the question a bit larger. If you want to have a go at this, and I would very strongly suggest you take a moment now, pause the video, have a go at the question before I go through a solution. Okay, so here's what I did initially on this question. I started by sort of looking at, well, let's start on point A, coordinate A, and see how I could travel along this grid. And I thought, well, if I go along right some amount, let's call it x, and then go up some amount, let's call it x, and then go along, let's call it x. By the way, these are all the same letter because this is a square, so the side lengths are all the same. Well, that's all well and good until I get to this point where I can't get up through this square, and I get to this point C, and I don't know how long that length is. And we've got a problem here because I can't use the letter x because it's not the full side length of a square. And if I start introducing new variables, new letters, then I'm just going to get myself into a whole lot of bother. And that's what I did the first time I answered this question and got a bit stuck. So that didn't get me anywhere. But sometimes in maths, it's about thinking about a different perspective. Okay, so the next approach I took was to think, well, maybe I don't need to trace all the way around the shape. Maybe I can just think about traveling in just one direction. So if I start on the start A, and then I only think about traveling in the x direction. So if I follow just horizontally along this square, I travel one amount of x, and then I'm going to ignore the fact that I'm going up. But let's just travel again along the next bit of square. So I've just going along to the right again, another amount of x. So it's the same x, same amount, and then I can do the same thing. Okay, if I just think about going left and right, I go another amount of x, and then same thing at the top. Okay, same thing in the top one. I travel a fourth amount of x. That takes my x coordinate from 6. So I start at 6. I go along x, along x, along x, along x, and that gets me to the same x position as coordinate B. Okay, so by traveling 4 x's, I've gone from an x coordinate of 6, I've added 4 lots of x on, and that's got me to an x coordinate of 38. Okay, and now I've got an equation that I can solve in terms of x. If I subtract 6 from both sides, I get 4x is 32, and so x is half of 16 is half of 32 is 16, half of 16 is 8, so it tells me that x is 8. And now I can change my diagram, and I can add in a different annotation. Instead of x, those side lengths are 8. Okay, happy days. Now, because this is a square, I know that every side length is 8, except that sort of quite annoying one that takes us up to C. So if I travel from my starting point along and up and along and up and along, I get to this point only partway through the square, so we get stuck. Now, sometimes in maths, it's about taking a different perspective. So rather than starting at A and moving up, what I'm going to do is start at coordinate B and go down. Now watch this. If I travel down 8, travel along another 8, down another 8, along another 8, and there we go. I've got from B to C. Okay, so sometimes reframing a question and thinking, well, I don't have to start at A, what other paths could I take? It makes your life a bit easier. Right, so there's two things to think about here. So I've gone from B to C. What's happened to each of my coordinates? Let's start with the x coordinate. Let's do some blue. So let's think about the x coordinate. I've started at 38, and then we've travelled 8 to the left to get past the 1 square, and then 8 units to the left to get to the end of the next square. So I need to do 38, take away 2 lots of 8, so 38 take away 16 is 22. And then if I think about the y direction, so similar thing. In the y direction, I started at 36, we go down 8, down another 8 to get to C. So 36 take away, let's get the pen back, that's 30. So we're doing y is 36 take away 2 lots of 8 again, so 36 take 16 is 20, and there we go. We've got our x coordinate of 22 and our y coordinate of 20, and that's a 5-mark question where I think it's difficult to see what to do. Once you've seen what you need to do, it's a lovely, easy question. But yeah, there's the challenge. Sometimes think about taking a different perspective. Don't just fixate on one idea.